What's up, y'all? Skills to pay the bills here. Chilling on a Sunday. Like, subscribe, share this shit. Tickle the bell. You know how we roll. But anyways, just sitting here. Saying to myself, it's mid-August, October. And how weird it is that we've got an election in less than a month and nobody's talking about it. I mean, we got Trump with a proven track record from 16 to 20 that had our GDP over 3% for the first time in decades, had us producing oil and selling it for the first time in decades, had the Remain in Mexico policy that was working, was bringing jobs back to this country, and was giving incentives for companies to bring their company back into this country. Because Trump understood that one of the things that made this country as great as it was our manufacturing might. I mean, they said it in World War II. We were the arsenal of democracy. Because if you look at the numbers of planes, tanks, jeeps, all types of military vehicles, and see the amount that we produced over the 6 years of World War II, it is staggering. We supplied Russia, we supplied Britain, we supplied our own men. You know, Britain just made their last World War II payment to us like a few years ago. It was a big thing in the news. But anyways, so we got this election coming up, and we got Trump on one hand, and then we got Kamala Harris on the other, who has not given us one explanation into anything she wants to do. I mean, she tells you what she wants to do, but has no plan, no inkling whatsoever about how to pay for it. So you know what that means. More money to the deficit. Because we're $30 trillion in debt, not because we owe money all around the world. It's the money we owe to ourselves. Like, I'll use small dollars here. Say we pull in $1,000 all together in tax money this year, but the government wants to spend $1,500. So what they do is they borrow that $500, and they, look Social Security, this place, that place, get a little there, get a little there, and then add that to the deficit, and say, oh well, we'll pay that back to Social Security or wherever at some point. And do you think that shit gets paid back? If you do, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but, maybe we did at one point, but we ain't anymore. I mean, some of these things that, have been going on over the last 4 years are just, not 4 years, but, even longer. It's just been horrific. I mean, look at what happens. You get Obama's president. You got the war in Syria. You got ISIS popped up. You got all that stuff going on. And Russia takes the Crimea. Then Trump becomes president. Everyone's on their best behavior. You know what he did in the meeting one time? He was in a meeting with the head of the Taliban, and they were talking about checks and balances to the withdrawal. And Trump said to the leader of the Taliban, if you hurt one hair on an American's head, and handed him a picture and walked out of the room. You know what the picture was? A satellite image of that man's home. Yeah, that's who they were dealing with. and he got respected. And was the world on their best behavior? Yeah, they were. I'm sorry, but I want somebody who is a proven businessman, somebody who's used to having a budget, large amounts of money, somebody who's been successful in their entire life, which is exactly who our founding fathers wanted to be president. They wanted people to go out and work and live in the private sector their entire lives until they got into like their 40s, their 50s. And then if they were highly successful, they would give back to the country with public service. And then all of a sudden, sometime in the 1900s, a thing called career politicians came into effect. And, we see them now. Nancy Pelosi, she's been in office for over 30 years. Dianne Feinstein, another one. She's in her 90s and she's still in Congress. Like, what are you doing at 90 years old still trying to run this country? Like, you have no idea what this country's like anymore. Your childhood and in formative years are now decades behind you, and you're still trying to run a country like you know what's going on. I don't get it. I mean, I actually saw this the other day, and Kamala Harris's teleprompter went out, and she froze like a snowball in a freezer, baby. Like, it was comical. Trump's teleprompter goes down, that dude just talks off the cuff for hours and hours and hours if he wants to. See, that's how you know he knows what he's talking about, is when you don't need a teleprompter. And that's who we want to be in charge of our country. Somebody who knows what they are talking about. Kamala Harris was a DA, assistant DA, down in California, where she locked people up for max sentences on weed. She kept prisoners past their release date to use them as slave labor. She was forced by a judge to hand over exculpatory evidence that freed a man. And she was going to hide this and let a innocent man serve time in prison. That's just disgusting. Like, growing up, that actually was one of my worst fears. I remember seeing that movie about Hurricane Carter, the boxer, who got locked up for decades and was innocent. And man, that movie touched me, man, because like I just couldn't imagine being in jail for the rest of my life, but being in jail knowing I'm innocent. I don't know, man. All I know is that we got an election coming up in a few weeks that is probably the most important election of our lifetimes, but maybe in America's lifetime, other than George Washington becoming our first president. We needed that. Lincoln, we needed Lincoln because whether or not the Civil War started because of slavery, it ended because of slavery. And what ended up happening was a race of people was set free, which I know I'm thinking with a 2024 mind, and when you consider history, you really can't do that because the way people thought in 1860 is so different that you would think we're two different species. So, you know, you gotta understand that when you look at points in history, you know, when you look at something that happened in the 1500s, you gotta be able to look at that with a 1500s mentality in order to understand things. But you know what? One last thing I don't understand is why in 2020 Democrats kept Joe Biden off of the debate stage because they knew that Joe Biden put next to Donald Trump was going to look terrible. So why did they allow it this time? If the plan wasn't to replace him with Camilla, why did they let that happen? Because all these people, Pelosi, Schumer, all of them, they all know Joe Biden personally. And they see everything that goes on with him. So, if there's anybody in the know, it was the DNC. And letting him go on stage like that was an absolute power move to replace him with Kamala Harris. Which, again, I mean, I don't even know who's more electable, Harris or Biden at this point. Because, I mean, they're both working on the same brain wavelength. So, with that said, anyways, this is just one man's opinion rambling on with his 2 cents on a Sunday morning. Skills to pay the bills. Like, subscribe, tickle that bell, and we'll talk to you next time.